I don't really believe in the like, oh, you have to be winning or, there's a winner or a loser. But I do think in a
Right.
lot of organizational change we can get caught in this idea of like, oh, I have to show them the way or my way. And so, the idea I want to express in the book is that resistance is usually a signal that their dignity is at stake. We can provide a way to save face, then we can find a way to move forward. The other piece of that is it's not just about the other person saving face. Very often when we're leading change, we are wrong because we're working with incomplete information.
Hi, everyone. This is Meg Rentschler, and welcome to the Star Coach Show. You just heard Michelle Pauk, author, executive coach, and founder of Streamside Coaching. Michelle has just published her first book, Build a Golden Bridge: How to Lead Change When You're Not in Charge. If you've ever been tasked with getting something done through people who aren't your direct reports, people who can essentially say, "You're not the boss of me," then this conversation is for you. We're going to talk about two things today. Michelle's going to share practical strategies to create real impact and navigate resistance when you simply can't tell people what to do. Whether you're a project manager, a change leader, or you coach clients who have these challenges in front of them. You're going to walk away today with actionable strategies for building bridges instead of burning them. We're also diving into Michelle's journey of actually writing and publishing this book, because I know that many of you have a book inside you. Michelle's going to share the real story of how she moved from someday I'll write a book to holding the finished product in her hands. Michelle was one of my students at UT Dallas, and it's been such a joy watching her grow and thrive. My conversation with Michelle continues for members of the Star Coach community, where she's going to share the most important skill that coaches need to continue to develop. To get more information about the next time the Star Coach community opens its doors for new members, to get access to the over 470 Star Coach episodes, and many free resources, including the phenomenal pricing guide so that you can price your services with confidence, go to starcoachshow.com. We've got so many free resources to help you thrive. starcoachshow.com. Now, let's dive into my talk with Michelle Pauk. Hey there, it's Meg. Before we begin the show today, I want to take a moment to remind you to check your credential. When does it expire? And are you ready to get some mentor coaching to really build those coaching muscles? I've just set the dates for my winter and spring 2026 programs, and they will fill quickly. So if you are needing some mentor coaching or wanting to build those muscles, go to starcoachshow.com/mentor, starcoachshow.com/mentor, and get all the details for my first two mentor programs for 2026. Now, let's get to the show. Michelle Pauk, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Thank you, Meg. I'm so excited to be here.
It is a joy to spend time with you. We're going to be talking about something so important around from several angles. We're going to be talking about the concept of how we lead when we only have influence and not authority, and how that can be a big gulp moment for a lot of people, a real struggle, and how we as coaches can help those leaders think about that. And those leaders who are listening, Michelle's going to give you some ideas of how you might navigate that. Along with that, we're going to share something really important, which is your courage and determination to put your learning into words, into the book, into something that you can now hold up and say, I have a book, and I'm so excited about that with you. And we're going to just dive into so many things because you've been a student of mine, you've been a client of mine, you've been just a joy. And so we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to welcome all of you to the show today. If you are watching us on YouTube, great to see you. If you're listening on platforms all over the world, we are delighted that you're here with us. And my request is if you are enjoying what we're doing on the Star Coach Show, take just a second and hit that subscribe button so that you are always aware of what's new and coming into your box automatically from the Star Coach Show. You don't want to miss guests like Michelle and all the strategies, tools, and resources that we provide to help you thrive as a coach and as a leader. So, with that being said, let me tell you about my very special guest today. So, as I mentioned earlier, Michelle was one of my former students many moons ago now, but she came through one of the programs that I teach in. And what I love about teaching coaching is that so many passionate people come into the program and so willing to kind of look at where I've come because you know what? Rarely does somebody just get born and then want to be an executive coach. It's usually we go through many different phases in our lives. We do many things and then it's like, oh, I want to either add coaching to my toolbox or make coaching be my thing. Well, Michelle came through the program and was just a shining star from the get go. You are going to absolutely, by the end of this interview, you're going to be like, I want more of Michelle, and we'll be able to tell you how to get more of Michelle. Michelle is the author of a brand new book, Build a Golden Bridge: How to Lead Change When You're Not in Charge. And as I mentioned earlier, that is a real struggle for so many people and organizations who are tasked with a project or tasked with a get this done thing that they have to collaborate with people who are not their direct reports. And how do they influence that? So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about like Michelle's business. So Michelle is the founder of Streamside Coaching. It's a boutique coaching and consulting firm that's dedicated to helping organizations lead change and build those collaborative cultures that we were just talking about. So Michelle works with lots of different kinds of people. We'll talk about that. You're an agile coach as well, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And a PCC through the ICF. She holds a master's in leadership and organizational development. She's a shining star. Michelle has been a part of the Star Coach community and is just such a, like when you talk with Michelle, you're just like, oh, she just has so much to offer and she's just so grounding. I don't know. She's just, well, I'm not going to hold back anymore. You get to experience her yourself. So, Michelle, once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Meg. I am just so thrilled to be here because I've been a listener since, I started my coaching journey, and it feels like making the big time to be on the Star Coach Show. So I'm very happy to be here.
So, I just want to congratulate you on making this vision of building this book and putting your experiences down in a way that it becomes a tool for others to use your experiences and your insights to help navigate these challenges that we can have when we're asked to get something done with a bunch of people who are like, you're not the boss of me. So, with that, let's maybe start because I know that lots of people who are listening might be in that place of, I know there's a book inside of me, but I don't have time. Or that's me. I hear that for myself all the time. Or where do I start? Or who wants to hear what I have to say? I mean, all the different messages that come in our brain. So, what is it that maybe was the thing that helped you get over? Maybe you didn't have any of those messages. What kinds of chatter was going on in your head when you thought about writing a book?
Oh, I had all of the chatter, and I think it didn't like go away magically. It was just kind of diligent practice over time and also listening to, several of my mentors. And so, I had certain phrases that would ring in my head, one of which is yours, Meg, which is, you can't be a secret and a success at the same time. So it's like, okay, well, you have to get out there and share. And I also remember kind of thinking that, having some concerns about, oh, is this like just a display of ego to say, what do I have to say or add to this topic? Many other people have written on this topic. They've shared brilliant insights. What is it that's valuable about putting my idea into the world? And realizing that, for all of those books that I have on my bookshelf that I completely treasure and learned something so valuable from, if any of those authors had said to themselves, well, there's nothing I have to add here, I might as well just keep this to myself, I wouldn't have benefited from that knowledge and wisdom. So if they could do it and think through it and have the courage to do it, then it may be worthwhile for me to do that too. But I had a lot of support and encouragement along the way, working with one of my other mentors and teachers from the UTD program. I worked with Pam Axe on, her mindset coaching when I just started out with the manuscript. And that was just so helpful for me to reframe some of those limiting thoughts and things that, will naturally hold you back from sharing in a bigger way than at least I had been used to.
Oh, so good. So tell me this, there were lots of things you could have like zeroed in and you had to come into something that was your core thing that you wanted to share. So you had to conceptualize the book. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I started working on the book about 2 years ago when I started my business, and I've spent about 6 months working in a direction that I ended up not continuing. So, there's a problem, something I wanted to explore about organizational change and how, I felt like that there wasn't adequate dialogue that would happen between people, vertically in an organization or horizontally in an organization, and just the way that I was approaching it, I just kept getting stuck. And so stopped. I put that like on hold for a little while. I started reading more books about the writing process and just to realize, oh, some of the things that I'm getting stuck on, this is just kind of what writing is like. And so that, so it took maybe 3 or 4 months and just wrote for fun, and then I had the idea of, "Oh, now here's a structure that I wanna put my ideas into." I was working with a client at the time who was dealing with this challenge in a big way, and I was thinking, "I've gone through this myself. How would I help her to learn how to do it herself instead of just taking over for her in a consulting kind of way and solving all the problems?" So, it's like, okay, I had, structure in mind to share with her, and then I thought, "Well, this could be the backbone of the book is explaining a process or a way of thinking that then I could share with more than just this one client. I could share it with many clients and kind of explain different way of going about this very common problem."
I just love that. The other thing that you said that I really want everybody to hear is that one of the blocks that you were having was kind of what's wrong with me? Why am I hitting a block? Or I've got this idea. And so you did research. You looked at like what's the writing process instead of maybe leaning more into leadership books or leading more into coaching books. You said, I'm trying to write, so maybe I should read about the writing process. And then you realize that what you were experiencing is not unusual. And I think that both for us and for our clients, when we can normalize a process, we can take away the what's wrong with me thing and say, oh, this is part of the process. Then it's almost like, oh, I'm growing, I'm learning. This is just part of the process. And it can shift our whole perspective and potentially drop some of those stories or barriers that we're putting in our own way. And I just love that you're like, I want to write, so maybe I should lean into the writing process and see what that's all about.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. That idea is just, I think, so important because it is easy to interpret the what's getting you stuck as the signal to stop, and it's really just, "Oh, no, I'm tackling something difficult, and this is just what that looks like."
oh, that's such great wisdom. That's going to be one of our quotes from today's episode. So, the other thing I want people to hear is that you landed on something that was very true and a learned experience for you. You were working with a client who was struggling with something that you yourself had struggled with before. And it clicked like this might be the process that it makes sense to share with others. And it's a process of trial and error. I just really want people to hear that. So, what was next? So, you finally conceptualize, you land on this might be the thing. What was next?
So the next thing I did was kind of put together an outline of how I would walk someone through this, set of ideas and a way of, taking some things that I had experienced, so some stories, some of the conceptual information, a lot of which I learned during my time at UTD, and how would I knit those things together and then bring them into some practical tools that people could apply to their own situation. So I wanted to layer in multiple ways of learning to help, people connect on an emotional level, on a cognitive level, and then take theory and be able to use it in their day to day. So I had like a way of going about each chapter. I laid out, how the chapters would go. And then I just made a plan for myself that was, okay, this is 8 chapters. I'm going to do a chapter a week. And the rule I made for myself was no looking back. Like the first draft is just you're only writing forward. You're not going back and re-edit. Like because
Oh, that's smart.
the
Yeah.
editor mindset, like in college, I was an English major. I loved to edit. I didn't conceive of myself as a creative writer. And so while I like to write for my classes and things like that, I was like always more comfortable editing or giving feedback on other people's work. Isn't that more comfortable because it's less
Yes.
exposed? Like when you're writing, you are creating, and it's a very vulnerable thing. And so the rule for that first draft was only look forward. And then after I completed the first draft, then I went back and retouched each chapter, pretty significantly, but you can't revise something you haven't written. So that was the rule I made, and it worked to get the
Well,
momentum
because
going.
imagine, you start to write chapter 4 and you're like, oh, I just thought of something. Let me go back and look at chapter 2. And then you're never like moving. So you made yourself get all the concepts down, maybe not
Yep,
perfectly, but they were down. And then once you had kind of put it all down, then it was time to go back and flesh it all out. So well
exactly. Yep.
done.
Yeah, it came together pretty quickly after setting some rules in place about it. Yeah.
I love that. So then you move into you have to publish it. So that must have been a heavy lift. Like, how do you figure out how to do that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found most valuable is just talking to other people who'd been through the process before. And so you get the manuscript, and here's the really like sad bubble bursting thing that happens if you're just writing a book for the first time and you're like, oh, I'm almost finished writing. And you think that that means you're done. And that's like, you're maybe a third of the way done. So, like, deciding which path are you taking? Are you trying to be traditionally published? Are you going to self-publish? That's a whole decision that may take several months, especially if you're querying publishers for or working with a literary agent. So, I decided to publish the book myself, but then that involved learning, well, how does one actually go about doing this? Like, who do I need to
Mhm.
hire for what level of editing what kind of design work do I need? The permissions research, I had research in the book and figuring out, well, who do I have to notify or ask permission? What's involved in that whole process? Each of those steps took far longer than I anticipated. It was just, there was more learning on that side. So the unfortunate thing was, okay, writing the book, I thought that was the hard part, but then, there were more surprises long after that. So, as
And
everything
yet,
goes the first time you do it. So,
right. And yet
yeah.
you were committed to it. I mean, you weren't like, oh, forget it. I'm just going to put the manuscript on my shelf. You were like,
Yes.
we are persevering. So bless you on that because you had a purpose for writing. And
Right.
if you just put the manuscript on the shelf, that purpose wouldn't have been fulfilled. So, what was your vision or your purpose for this?
Yeah, so I had a few goals. So one was I think just you feel compelled to do something and there's maybe not a real logical, it's like I've always wanted to write a book. So here it is, life goal kind of thing. But more practical, like why did I want to write this book? For me, it was I wanted to be able to communicate how I thought about change leadership and how all these different threads from my experience came together with agile coaching, more organizational, team coaching work. How does that fit into the process of navigating change? How does it come forward in the coaching work that I do? And so, this felt like a way of organizing my thoughts on disparate topics and putting them together in what at least is coherent to me, a structure. And so that was helpful kind of in organizing, like, what's the thesis of my business and what it is I'd like to offer people. And then from a practical standpoint, in the client work, it's nice to be able to say, like, oh, I'm hearing a client talk about an issue, and I can now say, please read chapter 4, please read chapter 5. Like, here's an experience. Maybe there's something you can learn here. Here's a technique that we can work on together. So it's given me, a way of packaging my ideas, being able to share them with people concisely. And as I was talking with a fellow author who's also in the same space, and one of the things she shared with me was, she was just thrilled that she was able to share her knowledge with people in this very affordable, democratic kind of way. Like, anyone can have access to a book. That's especially with, the coaching industry. Sometimes coaching is not super affordable or accessible to people, but they could
Right.
definitely benefit from, some of the ideas and things we have to share. And so a book, I kind of love that notion that just a book is a very democratized way of sharing information and putting it forth to anybody who would like it. So that was another purpose I had, was to share it a little bit more broadly than you might be able to with a coaching roster.
Oh, love that. So let's be democratic and let's look at, we're also sharing through the podcast. So, in that, let's share a couple of the strategies or tips that you would want leaders or workers, people who are trying to get work into the world and are put in this position. Often it's project managers or
Yeah.
people who are are being tasked with a particular thing, maybe without a team at all, or certainly that many of the people that they have to work with are not on their team. So let's put that hat on. And everybody who's listening now, we're going to share some tips or strategies for implementation. And so you leaders who are listening, this is something that you might really want to be able to do. Coaches, this is a way that you can help your clients really thrive in those challenging change management positions. So, Michelle, what is maybe one of the key messages that you would want people to think about from this concept?
Yeah. So I think the main thread running through the book is that change at work is often more difficult than it really needs to be, because we either ignore or minimize the human side of that change process. And just as we were talking about earlier, like having awareness of, this is the process of writing, or this is the process, I remember in the first few weeks of the coach training at UTD, we talked a lot about the process of learning to become so if you're starting to feel self-conscious, if you start to feel you have all this chatter going on in your head, that's normal and that's just part of learning. I think, when we go through change at organizations, we interpret things like people's resistance or questions or pushback that we get about a change as either a sign that, like, they're insubordinate or being lazy or stubborn or something, or that as leaders, oh, well, maybe that means that we did something right. If we understand, like, how change just naturally works, and we realize these are signals of something, but maybe not as we're interpreting that, then we can work with it more productively. So I talk about in the book what I perceive as three major gaps in how we navigate change. And so the first is self-awareness, like our own awareness of the change process, and then what pressures we might be under if we're in charge of leading it, but maybe not in charge of the people or all the things that are involved. The second is empathy. So if we are lacking the ability to look at, what does it feel like for the other people who are implicated in this change? How is this going to affect them, especially if they weren't involved in the decision making? And then the third is communication, where I think we often assume other people have access to the same information that we have. And so then all these things kind of fall apart, just, and sometimes that are quite practical and could be solved with some simple problem solving, but we're missing the communication, we're missing empathy, or we're missing awareness about either the process or our own reactions and pressures. And so, we talk through each of those and some strategies for addressing them in the book.
So, you talk about assumption and how assumption, when we're assuming that somebody, we can make all sorts of assumptions that get in the way. We talk early on, I was your very first instructor at UTD and was in that place of saying, okay, everybody, I know that all your chatter is going now, and you're assuming that everybody else in the class is getting it better than you're getting it, or that you're in a different place. And let's let go of assumption and maybe if we consider positive intent and just like look at everybody's
Yeah.
doing the best they can with what they've got at the moment, and then let go of those assumptions and communicate. Just absolutely adore that you're kind of putting that out there for everyone, and that in the book you provide some real strategies for people to bridge that communication gap and let
Yeah.
go of the assumptions.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because that's, I think, or the assumptions that we would not want others to make of us. So it's always that kind of like, okay, why would a reasonable, rational person act in the way that they're acting? And so, like in the first chapter, I talk about, which is focused on self awareness, I talk about an exchange that I had very early in my career when I was a project manager. And it was for a brand new project. And it was just a status meeting. And one of the content managers who's on the team shares that they've missed a deadline. And I'm like, okay, well, when are you going to be able to deliver this? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And he's like, well, we've never done this before. And so we really don't know how long it's going to take. And so I just blew up and I was like, this is completely unacceptable. Like, we have to have a date. And so we ended up in this shout. I've been in a shouting match maybe 2 or 3 times at work my entire life. And this was one of them.
That was one of
And,
them.
remember like kind of thinking about it late, like, oh, well, what really happened there? And so I talk about this in the book as if we look at what came out, why did that get to the point of a shouting match? And if you look at, I call this the action and reaction sequence. So just like in the, Newton's law of motion, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And if I looked at, what was I feeling? I was feeling frustrated. I was thinking, oh, well, what's going to happen if I submit this report to my boss and it has just this big question mark? People are going to think I'm incompetent. I don't have control of things as a project manager. Like, what if I lose my job? Obviously, not all of
Oh,
this is conscious. These are the things that are
they're
fueling.
fueling what's coming out of your mouth, right?
Exactly. And so, what's at stake for me in that is my reputation and my competence. Okay, so that's from my perspective. Now, if we look at his perspective, what was probably at stake for him was also probably his reputation and his competence. He's not going to put out another date only to have it blown out. He has no idea. He doesn't want to alienate his staff by telling them that they can do things that they know that they can't. So if he does something like that, he'll ruin his credibility. And then he's also probably feeling pressure. He's also probably feeling very frustrated. And so, when you step back from it, it's like, oh, we're actually mirror images of the same thing. As I've tested this as a technique with clients who are in, kind of locked in a situation like that with a peer, more often than not, when we kind of walk through this sequence, we see, oh, we have the same things are at stake. We may be approaching it differently, we may have different perspective,
Mhm.
but we both care about the issue at hand, and that's where the heat is coming from in the conversation. Once we realize, oh, we actually have something that we share, then we can start to figure out, well, how do we solve the problem that we're mutually dealing with. But if we don't see how any way we're connected, it's very difficult to find a way to move forward.
So we want to start with what's the commonality? What makes me like this? But we were both kind of in a panic of this has got to go well, and yet how we're going to get there might be very, very different. It's that concept of we're not all as different as we make ourselves out to be sometimes. So good. So I hope that these words are really resonating with those of you who are listening and sort of in this place of, oh, yeah, I get all caught up here. I get all caught up in my head and the stories that I'm telling myself and making the
Yeah.
other person the enemy rather than, and it's really difficult to come up with a solution with the enemy versus, okay, what's the commonality that we've got here? We're all trying to reach the same point. So how can we explore that? And I'm willing to bet that
Yeah.
that had something to do with the name of your book. The name of your book, I bet, is a metaphor. So how did you land on that?
Yeah, so the inspiration for the book, so there's a quote from Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War thousands of years ago, and he has there's this little line that's often translated in English. I don't read Chinese, so I don't know what it actually says, but it says that build your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across. And so the idea being here, like, from the military context, it's like if you have cornered your opponent into a place where there's no escape, what is likely to happen there? Well, they're going to fight back with everything that they have, because what do they have to lose? They've already lost. And so you can expect, really severe losses on both sides when you corner someone. And so instead of doing that, the wisdom, that we get from Sun Tzu is give them a golden bridge to retreat across. So they can exit with their dignity intact. Everybody, losses are minimized on both sides and you're able to move forward. The twist, of course, is like, I don't really believe in the like, oh, you have to be winning or, there's a winner or a loser. But I do think in a lot
Right.
of organizational change we can get caught in this idea of like, oh, I have to show them the way or my way. And so, the idea I want to express in the book is that resistance is usually a signal that their dignity is at stake. We can provide a way to save face, then we can find a way to move forward. The other piece of that is it's not just about the other person saving face. Very often when we're leading change, we are wrong because we're working with incomplete information. So that doesn't mean we had a bad plan or that we did something wrong. It just the situation is fluid. And so if we get stuck on a certain idea about how things should be, like I did when I was a project man, I made the plan. We need to get to the plan instead of adapting to the reality that's there. And if we get stuck on how we thought it should be, then we don't give ourselves any room to adapt to what's actually happening. So if we can create that space, we can all look at reality together. We can find ways to move forward and, not have anyone have to lose something important like their reputation or their status as part of that process.
As you were exploring that, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm hearing some of the motivational interviewing
Yep,
that we did together come out in that. So, how much
exactly.
was the concepts from the different courses that you learned in coaching? How did they maybe weave their way into this book?
Yeah, so you will see a lot of things that I learned, from my experience at UTD, kind of interwoven in the various chapters in the book. And for me, the reason why I think that plays such a central role for me is in my work. I'd started as a project manager, had been ineptly in many cases navigating these situations. My later work as an agile coach took more about like change and organizational change. But again, I was coming at that from a process perspective and not really appreciate why is it, you could get a team to work in a certain way, but once I hit the leader, there was always some kind of pushback. And so that was the problem that kept coming up again and again that inspired me to go back to school for executive coaching. And so what unlocked a lot of things for me in terms of being able to be more effective organizationally and holistically, not just serving one group and sacrificing another, was learning about some of these different concepts. So motivational interviewing being one, realizing like I have talked, I think in chapter 2 about ego states and how, I share a story of coaching a peer who was quite a bit older than me. And yet I came into those conversations as in my adult ego state, harping on, well, this is what the rules say. This is
Oh,
what
the
you should
parent
be doing.
ego state.
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry,
your
my parent.
parent ego
You're right.
state. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, forgive me, the parent ego state and harping on all of that. And of course, I got a rebellious child response from my peer because I was not treating them in that adult way. And so, after kind of looking back on some of these experiences, it was easier for me to see this is what was really happening from a psychological perspective. And then if I'm aware of that, I can choose a different way to engage with folks. So yeah, definitely have brought in those things that I've learned and incorporated them in the book because they're so valuable to me and I'm really grateful to have been exposed to all of that thinking.
Oh, that's so good. So, our time is getting short, and I just want to throw to you, what have we left open that is really important for the audience to hear, either about the process and your mindset about getting your work into the world, or the actual work and what you want people to think about regarding this concept of leading change when you're not in charge?
I think maybe this idea, like, I think there's like a lot of discomfort. I'll just like reframe that as discomfort in moving through difficult things, like working on a book or a big project, also navigating some kind of organizational change. And I think, we often look for a solution for like, how do we fix the discomfort or remove the discomfort? And what I've learned from this process, and then also kind of the meta lesson, that I'm hoping to share with clients along the way, is that there's something really valuable in all of that. If we can sit with it for long enough to see it, there's something that is really important that's trying to come through. And so I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago, when the book launched, to just celebrate the launch. And we also explored, what is the purpose of ambivalence when we're navigating our own change? And often, we're leaving something behind. Maybe that's something that served us a mindset or a belief or a habit. Maybe there's something that we need to let go of, but we need to do that with honor and respect. Otherwise, we'll keep clinging to it and we won't be able to move forward. And so, I think what's needed for that, sometimes people will say, "Oh, this will take too long." Well, it takes some time. That's true, but I think when we push, then we end up coming back to where we started. And so we can make it less painful. We don't have to have as much suffering if we just allow that to be uncomfortable for a little bit and sit with it. Then it's definitely easier to move forward and do so without that hesitation and kind of that swinging back. So if you're writing a book and you're hesitating about it, if you're, starting a new project and you're feeling some ambivalence, it is there for a reason. And if you spend some time to listen to it, it will tell you what it has to say. So that's what I would share as kind of a bow to wrap everything around.
What a beautiful bow. Michelle, it is always a joy to spend time with you, but I just want to thank you so much for bringing your perspective, bringing your vulnerability. You share examples that are very real and help us grow. And if we only share examples of when we're hitting it out of the park and not those times that we're like, I lost my head in that meeting, or my panic took over, or whatever the situation is, that's how we learn. We learn from our times that we fall down and scrape our knees, and others learn from that as well. So I want to congratulate you on your beautiful book. Where can people get a hold of it? And we will definitely have links in the show
Yeah.
notes, but in general, where would you recommend?
Yeah, well, you can find the book on Amazon. It's also available through Barnes and Noble, library. So it should be pretty much anywhere books are sold. You should be able to find a copy. So we've got hardcover, ebook, and paperback. So all of your traditional formats available wherever you get your books.
So good. And once again, the title is Build a Golden Bridge: How to Lead Change When You're Not in Charge, by Michelle Pauk. And Michelle, once again, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Meg. It has been an honor.
So good. So all of you, once again, thank you also for joining us and for being a part of the show, because I believe that we're all here on the earth together for a reason. We have more in common than different, but sometimes all we see is our differences. And I think Michelle spoke to that beautifully today. It's about perspective. It's about the things we choose to focus on. And I choose to focus on the value that each one of you brings to the world. So thank you for that. And until next week, this is Meg Rentschler wishing you the very best for your success. Thank you again to the amazing Michelle Pauk for joining us.